Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Imagine the unexplored world that preceded the cataclysmic flood, a world filled with secrets, myths, and mysterious creatures. According to biblical accounts, this was a world that witnessed the existence of extraordinary beings, men who lived for hundreds of years and formed lost civilizations. The narrative of the antediluvian world is captivating, full of fascination and intrigue, immortalized in the pages of the book of Genesis in the Holy Bible. Today, I present all the details about what the world was like before the flood, from the emergence of humanity to the divine events that changed the face of the earth and led to its extermination. Let's go back to the primordial days when the world was at the beginning of its journey. Adam and Eve, the pioneers of humanity, emerged from divine creation, shaped in the image of God. They were not just individuals, they were the beginning of a narrative that would shape the trajectory of all humanity. In the Garden of Eden, an untouched paradise untouched by the shadow of time, Adam and Eve enjoyed the fullness of creation amidst fruitful trees and breathtaking beauty. Direct communion with the Creator was a tangible reality, and each day was a symphony of peace and harmony. However, the hissing serpent of temptation entered the scene, slithering through the corridors of Eden. Eve, seduced by the promise of forbidden knowledge, succumbed to temptation and ate the forbidden fruit. Adam, influenced by his companion, did the same. This act of disobedience unleashed a cascade of consequences. The fall of humanity began the moment disobedience brought awareness of good and evil. Innocence was lost, replaced by awareness not only of physical nakedness but also spiritual. God, in His justice, called Adam and Eve to account for their actions. This disobedience was not just a rule-breaking, it was a watershed moment in the intimate relationship between God and humanity. Trust was replaced by mistrust, harmony by conflict, and creation was now stained by sin, a shadow looming over the original perfection of Eden. Yet, even in this dark moment, a spark of hope emerges. God, in His mercy, did not abandon His creatures. He clothed them with garments made by His own hands, symbolizing a covering for their shame. While pronouncing the consequences of sin, He also proclaimed a promise of redemption, pointing to the future. Initially, Adam and Eve had two sons mentioned in the Bible, Cain and Abel. The firstborn, named Cain, had a name that reflected Eve's gratitude and joy at receiving the gift of life. Later, Abel came into the world, bringing with him the promise of a new generation. The two brothers grew up in the paradisiacal environment of the Garden of Eden, under the loving guidance of their parents, learning the ways of worship and offering to God. However, even in the refuge of Eden, the seeds of discord began to sprout. When the time came to offer sacrifices to God, Abel brought the best of his flock, a gesture reflecting sincerity and devotion. Cain, on the other hand, offered the fruits of his harvest, but his heart was not fully committed. God favored Abel's offering, recognizing the purity of his intention. Cain's reaction to God's preference was soaked in envy and anger. Instead of correcting his heart, he allowed resentment to turn into a deadly poison. In a fit of rage, Cain lured Abel into the field and there, with clouded emotions, committed the heinous act of taking his own brother's life. The ground witnessed the first shedding of human blood, a stain that would reverberate throughout history. God confronted Cain, offering him a chance at redemption, but his hardened heart chose the path of guilt. The biblical text recounts that, in addition to disapproving of Cain, God also marked him in some way. The exact nature of this mark is not explicitly described in the Scriptures, leaving room for interpretations and speculations. Some see it as a visible sign, a badge identifying him as the perpetrator of the first murder in history. Others view the mark as a spiritual symbol representing divine separation and condemnation. Regardless of its nature, the mark served as a constant reminder of Cain's actions. Furthermore, it acted as a kind of divine protection, preventing anyone who encountered Cain from harming him. This underscores that, even in His justice, God exercised mercy after the tragic episode in which Cain took his brother Abel's life. After this event, Cain journeyed to the land of Nod, situated beyond known boundaries. There, he began a new chapter in his life, finding a wife and welcoming a son named Enoch. Despite the shadows of his past, life continued for Cain and his family. The biblical account highlights that Cain not only started anew but also left his mark on the land of Nod by undertaking the construction of a city. This attests to his determination to overcome the consequences of his actions. The city, named in honor of his son Enoch, symbolizes Cain's desire for stability and establishment. Perhaps it was an attempt to create a legacy that would transcend past tragedy. However, even in his efforts to build something lasting, Cain carried with him the indelible mark of the first homicide in history. It is important to note that the biblical narrative does not delve into the details of intellectual or technological development in past eras, focusing primarily on the spiritual and moral aspects of the characters' actions, highlighting the relationship between humanity and the divine. Nevertheless, even before the flood, humans demonstrated remarkable capabilities. As mentioned, Cain built a city. Noah, a central figure in the flood narrative, stood out for his obedience to God in building the ark. The biblical account emphasizes the divine guidance he received to carry out this colossal task. The construction of an impressive vessel capable of housing a vast variety of animal species raises questions about technical knowledge, requiring a remarkable understanding of engineering and logistics. Addressing a common question, I'd like to clarify. But before I do, I ask that you please like this video and subscribe to the channel to support our work. Now, regarding the biblical genealogy traced from Adam and Eve, it remains a subject of study to this day. After the fall in Eden, Adam and Eve gave birth to Cain and Abel, and later to Seth, who became crucial in the continuity of human genealogy. It is important to highlight that the book of Genesis makes mention of the fact that Adam and Eve gave birth to other sons and daughters, although not all names were recorded in the Holy Scriptures. Corroborating this information, other sources, such as the Book of Jubilees, not only corroborate this claim, but also provide the names of some of these daughters. If you are interested, we have a video on our channel that specifically addresses the issue of Adam and Eve's daughters. The lineage of Seth continued with significant names such as Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, and Methuselah, each representing a generation that witnessed the highs and lows of history. The genealogy culminated in Noah, chosen by God to survive the flood along with his family. Through Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, humanity multiplied, inaugurating a new post-diluvian chapter. The antediluvian period before the flood is described in the Bible, especially in the book of Genesis, but it does not provide a precise indication of the exact duration of this period. The biblical chronology, extending from creation to the flood, is calculated based on the ages of biblical characters and the mentioned generations. Adam lived for 930 years, and other biblical figures, such as Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, and Lamech, also lived for hundreds of years each. The chronology suggests that the flood occurred when Noah was 600 years old. By calculating the ages and the generations mentioned in biblical genealogy, some scholars have arrived at an approximate estimate of about 1,600 years from creation to the flood. However, it is important to note that the Bible does not provide an exact count for each year, and these calculations are based on interpretations and assumptions about the consistency of genealogies and other factors. As narrated in the biblical accounts of the antediluvian period, people enjoyed extraordinarily long lives. Methuselah, for example, holds the title of the longest-lived person mentioned in the Bible, living for 960 years. This longevity is attributed to a series of factors, as interpreted by the Scriptures. Initially, exposure to the pure and untouched environment of the Garden of Eden contributed to robust health and remarkable longevity. Additionally, the original diet consisted of natural and fresh foods, contrasting with post-diluvian conditions. The antediluvian lifestyle was characterized by a more direct closeness to God. Communion with the divine was an integral part of daily life, and humanity enjoyed a more intimate relationship with the Creator. Daily activities included constant contact with nature, tilling the land, raising livestock, collecting water from rivers, and, evidently, offering sacrifices to God. Initially, before the flood, people spoke only one language, suggested by the story of the Tower of Babel. However, the Tower of Babel marks a crucial point in history when humanity, in its quest for grandeur and autonomy, decided to build a tower that reached the heavens as an expression of its own greatness. Upon observing this endeavor, God decided to intervene. As a result of the human attempt to build the Tower of Babel, God confused the languages of the people. The biblical account states that suddenly people began speaking different languages, causing confusion and division, rendering the continuation of the construction impossible. The name Babel is derived from the Hebrew word Baal, meaning to confuse. Thus, the event became known as the Tower of Babel, due to the resulting linguistic confusion. The most immediate consequence was the dispersion of humanity across the face of the earth. Unable to communicate effectively due to the diversity of languages, people separated into distinct groups, each going its own way. This event not only altered the linguistic fabric but also shaped the different cultures and ethnic identities that emerged as groups spread out. Therefore, the Tower of Babel not only symbolizes the fragmentation of language but also personifies divine intervention to counterbalance humanity's unchecked ambition. This dispersion had a significant impact on the current cultural and linguistic diversity around the globe. Over time, the Book of Genesis describes a society immersed in an environment of increasing moral decay and sin. The narratives indicate that humanity deviated from righteous paths, indulging in practices that contradicted the moral and ethical standards set by God. Among these practices, there are accounts of murders and a rampant pursuit of sensual pleasures. The pre-Diluvian society is portrayed as sinking into a downward spiral of moral decay, where ethical values were subverted, and justice was neglected. An intriguing element introduced in this context is the mention of the Nephilim in Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1-4. The sons of God are described as interacting with the daughters of men, resulting in the Nephilim. The interpretation of these verses has been a subject of debate throughout history. The expression, sons of God, is interpreted in various ways, one of which is associated with celestial or angelic beings. In this perspective, the sons of God would be fallen angels who engaged with human women, giving rise to the Nephilim. These hybrid beings are often associated with malevolent influence and the exacerbation of corruption in society. The angels who rebelled and engaged with human women had offspring with them, giving rise to the Nephilim, also known as giants on the earth. These beings were extraordinarily tall and strong, gaining great renown at the time and being viewed as monstrous figures according to ancient Jewish traditions. Many of them were associated with the practice of magic and even cannibalism. Records suggest that there were conflicts between different races of giants, leading to a war possibly instigated by the angel Gabriel. This episode, considered a peculiar and distortionary point in human history, involved the intervention of fallen angels or demons who tampered with beings already created by God. The Nephilim were essentially a fusion between divine creation and the malevolent interference of these fallen angels, who materialized as men and engaged with women. The Bible describes these beings as reaching impressive heights, with some even reaching up to 5 meters. During this period, the prophet Enoch made a prophecy about the coming of the Lord with thousands of saints to judge the wicked for their wicked deeds and insolent words. These events transcend the Nephilim, also encompassing powerful animals that existed before the flood. One example is Leviathan, often interpreted as a gigantic water dragon that breathes fire and has scales made of metal, as described in the book of Job. The Bible also mentions other giant reptiles, identified today as dinosaurs. These events, unfolding over approximately 1,200 years from the time of Jared to Noah's flood, were marked by great tribulation on earth, involving fallen angels, giants, witchcraft, and sorcery, contributing to the formation of ancient civilizations with disturbing and ancestral knowledge. The verses mentioning the Nephilim highlight the extent of corruption in the antediluvian society and eventually contribute to the divine justification for the flood as a means of purifying the earth from this growing wickedness. Amid this antediluvian society, where corruption and sin multiplied, a handful of individuals stood out as notable exceptions. Among them, Enoch stands out as someone who walked with God intimately and uniquely. His closeness to the divine was so remarkable that, unlike most, he did not experience common death. God took him directly to himself. Another striking figure, as mentioned earlier, was Noah, a righteous man in his generation. Amid surrounding wickedness, Noah found favor in the eyes of God. He was chosen to build the ark, an act of obedience and faith, becoming the means by which God preserved humanity and animals during the flood. God chose Noah for his righteousness and integrity in a time when human wickedness was widespread. The ark was designed to shelter Noah, his family, and two of every kind of animal, demonstrating God's care not only for humanity but for all creation. Noah, obedient to the divine call, undertook the incredible task of building the ark, a work reflecting his unwavering faith in God and his commitment to the preservation of life. Throughout the construction process, Noah also became a preacher of righteousness, warning people about the imminent flood and urging them to repent of their ways. However, disbelief permeated society. People mocked Noah, rejected his words, and continued in their sinful paths. The flood, as described in the biblical narrative, lasted 40 days and 40 nights. During this period, the waters rose, covering the entire earth. Noah, his family, and the animals were preserved in the ark, while the rest of humanity perished in the waters. As the waters began to recede, Noah sent a dove to investigate the conditions outside the ark. When the dove returned with an olive leaf in its beak, Noah understood that the waters had withdrawn, and the earth was renewing itself. After the flood, the biblical narrative highlights a moment of renewal and hope. Noah, his family, and the animals in the ark were the only survivors of the catastrophe that purified the earth. Recognizing the righteousness of Noah and his family, God established a covenant with them and all creation. This covenant was symbolized by the rainbow in the sky. In Genesis, chapter 9, God tells Noah that the rainbow in the clouds will be a sign of the covenant between him and the earth. The rainbow became a lasting symbol of God's promise that there would never again be a flood to destroy all life on earth. This covenant reflects not only God's justice but also his mercy and the promise to preserve life, even in the face of challenges. The narrative continues with the story of humanity restarting from Noah's family. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of different groups of people. Noah's blessing and curse on his sons played a role in shaping future nations. Thus, the post-Diluvian history is marked by the renewal of creation, God's promise of preservation, and the opportunity for humanity to start anew. The rainbow remains a reminder of the divine covenant, symbolizing God's faithfulness and his willingness to establish redeeming relationships with humanity. If you enjoyed this story, 2 more videos with similar biblical stories will appear on your screen. Just click to watch. Remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Thank you, and may God be with you. See you soon.